I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
This year, our featured exhibit is Newburgh, A Giant Leap Forward, which of course insinuates the big reason we're here today, to learn about the space race. The pivotal times of 1960 to 76, not only on a global aspect, our country, but also in Newburgh, Indiana. And today we're going to kind of learn about the local impact that this huge global event as the space race had to our little region here in southern Indiana. And so to talk about the space race and the local hero, Virgil Gus Grissom, you'll see some photos here behind, and this is the Memorial Museum. That our guest speaker today is Mark Young. Thank you so much for being here. He is the property manager at Spring Mill State Park and the Grissom Memorial Museum. If you haven't been there, highly recommend going to the museum, the Pioneer Village. It is an amazing, beautiful facility, and I can't wait to learn more. So on that note, let's hear a little bit about Mark Young.
First, quick little background about me. I received a degree in biology from Franklin College, and I received a master's degree from the only real university in Indiana, Indiana University. I shouldn't say that around anything related to Gus because he's a Purdue graduate. But I've been involved with the Department of Natural Resources since I was 16 years old. I'm actually in my 54th consecutive summer working for DNR. I became an assistant property manager at Starve Hollow with forestry at the time. It's over by Brownstown, Indiana. Then I moved up to Pokagon State Park. Then I moved to Potato Creek State Park. Both of those are far northern properties where I became a regional supervisor in charge of all the northern parks in Indiana. My first son was born, and my wife said, okay, I'm done with all this traveling. So Spring Mill came open, we moved down to Spring Mill, and we've been down there for 34 years. So Spring Mill is one of those parks that's really special. And that's what this talk will be letting you know how special it is. When you come to Spring Mill, it's only 1,354 acres. But we have the Grissom Memorial, which is dedicated to Gus Grissom, one of the original 7 astronauts. We have a Pioneer Village, and yes, it was a real village, and it was active from 1814 all the way up into the early 1890s. But then we also have old growth forest. Old growth means it's never had any timber cut off of it. We have 67 acres of old growth forest. And then we have caves. We have lots of caves. And so we're home of blind cavefish, blind crawfish. And so when you come to Spring Mill, we really are more of a destination. A lot of state parks, you can spend a quick little weekend there and have fun. We're a destination. You can spend time. It's hard to go through the Pioneer Village in 2 hours and be able to see everything we have. We have 15 buildings down there, and we have about 2,000 artifacts in there. And then the Grissom Memorial, which I'm going to be talking about. Betty Grissom, Gus's wife, before she passed away, started sending stuff to us. Just through UPS, we get surprise packages. We'd open up, oh cool, look at all this stuff she sent us. And she knew that we would take care of them. And so she didn't give us a permanent loan or donation. It was a 99-year loan that she signed. So it's going to be with us for a long time, the stuff that she sent us. So I wanted to start off by saying, talking a little bit about, well, why do we have a memorial for an astronaut in Spring Mill State Park? Well, most all of you probably have heard all about the space program. And in 1957, the United States was wanting to race against Russia. And so they started up the manned space flight program. and they selected 7 astronauts. And most of those astronauts were actually test pilots for the military, either Navy or Air Force. And Gus was selected as one of the original 7 astronauts. Well, the space program in the United States was broken into 3 phases because President Kennedy said, hey, we're going to be on the moon by the end of this decade. Well, that was in 1960, so I had until 1969 to get it done. So they broke it into 3 phases. First was the Mercury program. That was just our first step of seeing if we can build something to get a person up. Most of them were suborbital flights. That means they didn't even go all the way around the planet. They just went up and back down. And that stage is just to see if we can do it. Can we do do we have the technology to get them up and back down safely? The second phase was Gemini program. Now that's where we ended up going up and making multiple orbits around the planet. We did a bunch of things, like in Gus's case, he was the first astronaut to actually turn the spacecraft around, change directions in space. And then later missions, they attached themselves to other things. And all this was just trying to get ourselves prepared for the Apollo program. And the Apollo program was the program that was going to take us to the moon and bring them back. So Gus's first flight, he was the 2nd astronaut into space. And that was Liberty Bell 7. So he went up, it was a 15-minute suborbital flight. But the most noticeable thing for him was that when he got back down, the hatch blew. And really, he almost drowned. But they were able to get him out. And so that created some questions. Well, why did it blow? Because what it is there's just a button in the spacecraft, and they were supposed to hit it with their elbows if they needed to get out fast. Well, early on, everybody was pointing a finger at him. He just got scared and wanted to get out of the capsule. Several years ago, they brought Liberty Bell 7 back up, and it's on display at the Kansas Cosmosphere out in Hutchinson, Kansas. And what they were able to determine is, no, he didn't do that. And all the astronauts already knew it, because they said if you tried to hit that button, you'd get a bruise. He didn't have a bruise. So he was the 2nd one up, but then they could tell that he was the most experienced one. He was the one that was more aggressive in trying to figure this stuff out. He was very involved in the design of the capsules. So the second program, 2nd stage, Gemini. Well, he went up with another astronaut, John Young, no relation. Again, what this one was, they changed the direction of the spacecraft. And it went real smooth. They went 3 orbits, came back down, everything piece of cake. Now, there's one notorious thing that occurred in this one. Or actually 2. First, astronauts could name their capsules. Well, after Liberty Bell 7 sunk, Gus decided he was going to name the 2nd capsule Molly Brown, for the unsinkable Molly Brown. Well, NASA wasn't too excited about that, and they never let him do it after that. So, but that name stuck with the capsule. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that there was a story. Gus and John Young were up in the capsule making their orbits, and Gus could smell what smelled like something, food. And he looked over, and John Young was eating a sandwich. Well, they're not supposed to do that. They weren't supposed to do that. And Gus says, "Where'd you get that?" He says, John says, "I hid it. Here, do you want one?" And so he gave Gus one. Well, they started eating until chunks of the bread started floating around. They knew they'd get in trouble for that, so they hid them. But we actually have a replica of the sandwich at the Grissom Memorial. Not the real one, it'd be pretty yucky by now, but we have a replica of one, and everybody wants to see it. So they made the first 2 stages, and everything was moving along pretty good. The Apollo program, though, they were really pushing the technology at that point. All the technology was brand new. There were lots of discussions about all the wiring for all the stuff that had to take place for these capsules to get up into space, to connect to another module and take the craft that they're going to land on the moon. And there was just a lot. Plus, Gus remembered how that hatch blew. So Gus said, we got to do something different with that. So they ended up putting basically 2 layers of bolts into the door of the Apollo spacecraft. So as they started practicing with the Apollo spacecraft, they were discovering lots of little glitches with the system, but that's just because they were pushing this technology so fast. And the wiring was so loose that they would constantly find problems where wiring wasn't covered and stuff. It was noticeable enough that even there was an interview where Gus was asked about that. He says, listen, I'm a test pilot. He says, my job is to fly these things. He says, if something happens, it happens. The goal is getting to the moon, not what might happen. And whether he had a premonition or not, he actually said that in there, but he tried to tell everyone, we're so cutting edge right now, technology-wise, I'm not worrying about it. Well, he and 2 other astronauts went into Apollo 1. Now, all they were doing is they were on top of the Saturn V rocket, they were in the module, and they were running through tests. That's all it was. They were just testing to see how things were going to function. They went through most of the day without any problems at all. They were about ready to shut it down. But they had them sealed into the capsule just like they would have if it was launched. One of the other little weaknesses that they realize now is that they use pure oxygen. Well, pure oxygen is not very good around flames. So there are recordings still in place where they heard one of them, they couldn't tell which astronaut it was. Hey, there's a spark. And then you heard someone else say fire. And it just took off. The folks outside realized what was going on. They couldn't get in there to help because there were so many bolts to loosen up. Plus, with a pure oxygen environment, the heat inside that capsule was tremendous. And so they tried their best, but eventually they had to back away. There were at least 2 or 3 of the technicians that were injured trying to get in there and loosen the bolts. And so all 3 astronauts died. But it delayed the program another year. So as we all know, in 1969, we made it to the moon. But it was a much safer flight. Their sacrifice helped us really achieve that goal. They were able to come in, redesign everything, and take our future astronauts onto the moon and bring them back safely. So the main story that we try to tell at Spring Mill at the memorial is, first of all, he's a small town boy that made it to be very important. And one of the ways we show that is Betty gave us some of his grade school report cards. Bad boy. He actually got F in Latin, and he got some other low grades. And so we try to instill into all the kids that come, and we on average get about 8,000 school children go through the memorial each year. Listen, you don't have to be super smart in school to do great things. Hard work is what you need to do. And so that's our first message we try to do. But then we talk about the sacrifice. I mean, he gave his life so that we could make it to the moon. But everyone I talked to that had a connection with him, they all said he didn't even think about that. He was hard driven, he was goal driven, but none of that ever really bothered him. He didn't want the limelight. He didn't like the limelight. Matter of fact, we have one photo that I've refused to put out in the displays. And it's a photo of him with all the original 7 astronauts each got a free Corvette convertible. And this one, I don't know who's driving, but he's in the back seat. And the photographer's there, and the photographer takes a picture, and Gus is using a hand sign that's very well known in this country. But he's laughing the whole time. You talk to all the local folks, that's Gus. That was Gus. But I still won't show that out in the public. No, I'm not going to do that. When he was killed, that was January 27th, 1967. Immediately after that, legislature decided we're going to do something. And so they decided to raise money to build a memorial for him. Then the question was, where? Well, Spring Mill's just 3 miles from Mitchell. He grew up in Mitchell. So rather than purchase more land to build something, the decision was made, let's just put it at Spring Mill. And so they started construction in July 18th, 1971. We dedicated it for the first time. Now, not me, I was still freshman in high school, so I wasn't part of this. But it did take place. The memorial, the bulk of the items we have are Betty's stuff that she held on to. And it's amazing how much stuff she had. We've got enough of his personal items, awards and plaques and photographs and everything, that we maintain a 3-year rotation. So we're able to show folks new things and let them run for 3 years and then switch them out and have another batch of things to show them. And amazingly, she stored all this stuff in her attic. We literally would just have UPS deliver us, it's got a box, and then I'd look and it's from Betty. And she just shipped all this stuff to us through UPS. And we would open up the box and we were like a bunch of kids, looking at all these things that she sent, including his Space Congressional Medal of Honor. Just a box. But it's going to be there for lots and lots of years. Lots of people are going to be able to see this and hopefully understand what truly the sacrifice was. Betty herself, I got to meet her a few times. She was a firecracker. She defended Gus, and she was bound and determined not to let the world forget Gus. She wasn't happy with NASA. She never was happy with NASA. But you got to at least appreciate her dedication to help maintain his memory. He had 2 boys. Both of them have been to the park several times over the years. They're both gray-haired now too. And so their interest is still there, but they were very agreeable to having Betty send all this stuff to us because they know that we'll keep maintaining it as long as we can. So those are the main things. And like I was talking earlier, Indiana, historically, 4th grade was Indiana history. So we all had gone through 4th grade and we had Indiana history. In our peak, we were getting about 15,000 school kids a year come through the park between the spring and the fall because of Indiana history. We're still 8,000 range plus, depending on the year. But they all go through the Grissom Memorial. They get to learn about Gus. And then they can go down to our Pioneer Village and learn about our past. And then they get to go into Donaldson Woods and see old growth forest. So it's a good place for kids to see a whole lot of stuff. But for the Grissom Memorial, it's interesting some of the artifacts that we have in there. We have the Molly Brown, the actual spacecraft that went up into space. We got it. We've got the glove mold that they used his hand to prepare him for his Apollo suit. And then we had his spacesuit. Spacesuit's gone now. We had to give it back because the capsule, the mold, and the spacesuit and the helmet all actually belong to the National Air and Space Museum, Smithsonian. And unfortunately, even though we've maintained it very well, and they were very appreciative, spacesuits were designed for a non-oxygen environment. Well, that's sort of hard for us to achieve and still let people see it. So, National Air and Space Museum just recently took the suit back. They're going to keep it, hopefully not in perpetuity, but their goal is to take it back, store it for a while, do some restoration work, and then I probably won't be around, but I've left word that we better work really hard to get that suit back to the memorial. But even with that, there's still a lot of other cool stuff. One of the best ones is when you go to the memorial, you start in his school days, then you go to his college days, then you go to his test pilot days, and then you go through the Mercury, Gemini, and then the Apollo programs. That's how we take you. In the Mercury program, we have a helmet, and it's a Mercury helmet. We always thought it was a test helmet. Because they custom made everything for the astronauts, NASA did. They just custom made, built everything, and then they had multiple copies. So if there's damage, or they just run this, but if they wear the test helmets, but then when they get into the actual launch, then they use this other helmet. So the story is that the helmet was found by an Air Force colonel or major that flew with Gus. He was at one of the NASA facilities. I guess they were letting him dig through stuff, space stuff, and he found this helmet. He took it. Him and another Air Force major came to Mitchell, and they did a presentation to Gus's parents. They said, "Here, take this." Well, when we built the memorial, the parents said, "You know what, it'd be great to have it on display in the memorial." So they donated it to the memorial, and it's been on display since then. A few years ago, a person that I talked to a lot with the Air and Space Museum, she called me up out of the blue, and she goes, "Hey, how easy is it to get into that helmet? I said, well, I had a few screws in the case and we can be there. She goes, would you do me a favor? And I said, sure. She said, they used red ink and they would put numbers and letters in it so they knew which helmet belonged to which astronaut and whether it was the practice or not. Now, jump back. When he landed in Liberty Bell 7 and the hatch blew, we don't know what happened to the helmet. Everyone assumed that it floated away or went down with the capsule and then maybe came out. Jump back. And so I dug into the helmet, flipped it over. By golly, there's red ink. So I wrote it down. I called her back. And I said, hey, there is something written on it. She goes, what does it say? And I can't remember exactly how it was numbered or lettered. I gave it to her. There was silence, and then I won't repeat the word she said, but it was a 4-letter word. And she goes, I'm not going to ask any more questions. So we have a suspicion that it may have been one of his primary helmets, but we're not going to tell anyone that, just you all. So, you know, we do get a lot of those. And like I said, the Space Congressional Medal of Honor, my gosh, to see that thing and to know that he received it after he was dead. And better get it. We do have his Air Force hat for his full uniform hat. That's the only part of his uniform that is out there. Betty had him buried in his full uniform, but she kept the hat, and then she gave it to us to put it on display. So that's what we've been doing since 1971, trying to maintain his memory, to help celebrate his life and his contributions, and trying to get future generations to remember that sacrifice he made. Beyond that, you know, that's sort of a short discussion. The park itself, like I said, I think we have the Pioneer Village is another museum. It's an open air museum with about 2,000 artifacts in it. And so I'm sort of, that's my main thing, is museum oriented activities with about 750,000 guests a year. So throw that in the mix and it gets pretty fun. Does anybody have any questions?
I remember they had rooms in the basement and they had rooms up in the attic.
Yeah, what he's talking about, we have Spring Mill Inn located in Spring Mill State Park. It was built between 1937 and 39. And it was, we had to shut it down for 2 years, and we went through a full renovation, all new HVAC. I mean, you name it, we did it, and at a cost of $26 million. We went away from the swimming pool. Yes, we're getting in trouble for that, but we went away from a swimming pool and went in with a splash pad. That was another $2 million. And then we have a parking garage for the inn, and we had to put $2 million in there. So the total project was $30 million, and it took us 2 years to do it. Yeah. If you want to go into any of the other caves, you have to get a permit, and that's a partnership with the Indiana Karst Conservancy. There's no fee, but you just got to learn some decontamination. We have to worry about white nose syndrome. Anybody that doesn't know, white nose syndrome is an infection that has impacted significantly bat populations. And so we want to make sure people that do go caving decontaminate themselves properly so that they can not spread the stuff. Yes.
Did you get a chance to talk with Betty?
Uh-huh.
Did she tell you specifically why she was upset with NASA?
Well, yeah, she was really blunt. They killed him. That's exactly, I mean, she was a very blunt person, but you had to take into what she meant by that. I think what she was trying to say is that they were rushing too much. They were trying to get this thing done because of what President Kennedy said. And so I don't think it was murder, but unfortunately some of the tabloids got a hold of that. And there was a little while some tabloids running that he was murdered and that it was a Russian conspiracy to try to slow us down and all that stuff. But you talk to her personally, it just, you know, you could just tell they were a loving couple, and it just impacted her significantly when she lost him. And to the day she died, it was that way. But yeah, she's a...
So was negligent?
Well, that's a good question. I think you go back to what Gus said. Gus said he's a test pilot. He knew there were things wrong, but his job was just to operate the equipment. He wasn't supposed to complain. It was his job. So I think he knew what his job was. She just wasn't completely satisfied with that answer either. So, but she's a really fun person just to talk to. She was very involved. When we had the rededication after some work that we had done there in 2009, she showed up and was there and actually did an interview with some of the media, and she didn't hold back anything. So she's a firecracker, a good one. Any other questions?
Is any of that videotape with her talking?
There may be, but it would still be, the media never gave us any of it. Yeah.
Are you still getting good crowds?
At the memorial, about 80,000 a year, 28 different countries and 50 different states every year.
A little bit more than us.
Well, you know, it's, you know, we're a little lucky. Now, you all are close too. I mean, Evansville, but we're real close to Bloomington. So we do see a pretty significant number of folks from other nations probably going to school there. But yeah, we're, you know, 28 different countries and 50 different states.
Could you tell us a bit more about Gus's time serving in the military?
Well, you know, it's one of those cases where he got out of high school, went straight into the Air Force. He wanted to go in, but he went into World War II. He ran out of time. You know, by the time he got trained, World War II was over. So for a short period of time, he actually, now Mitchell is known for one thing, big thing, and it's carpenters. Anybody heard of Carpenter school buses? They were made there, and they had a plant there. And so he went there for a short period of time. Oh no, I'm not going to do this. And so that's when he went to Purdue. But he also got a chance to serve in Korea. There he had about 100 flights. I mean, he didn't just go there. He had 100 flight missions. And so, and then when he was done with that, then the Air Force said, well, why don't you help us train in jets? Then he turned into a test pilot. So he went to Wright-Patterson. And there he became a test pilot, and that's how he got selected for the Mercury program. Pretty cool. He's just, yeah.
So do you think he would have taken Neil Armstrong's place? There was rumors.
I don't like saying that, but yes, the general sense was that he's the one that had the most experience, and that he probably would have been one of the first three there, probably one of them to actually make it on the moon. Yes, that's the consensus. We even heard that from other astronauts. So yeah, he had a bit of a reputation. Oh, and I can tell you one thing about Betty being opinionated. You did not ever mention the right stuff in front of her. She did not like that movie. The movie, she felt, misrepresented what Gus was really like. And oh yeah, if you wanted to get her riled up, that got her going pretty quick. Yeah, the right stuff, yes.
And how many other astronauts have gone to the memorial?
Let's see. There's a local boyhood home too, where a local group has restored his boyhood home, not his birth, his boyhood home. And they have a special program. They've moved it a couple times. I think it's going to be in September or October. It's called the Galactic Gathering. And they've been able to get some astronauts. I can think of 4. But see, Lawrence County's got other astronauts beyond just Gus. So I can think of 4 that have shown up and at least visited. Most of them are the newer ones, the shuttle program folks. Yes?
Did he grow up in town or out in the country on a farm?
In town. His dad works for the old B&O Railroad, right? I mean, the depot was right down there. And so he literally, his dad, where they live is literally 5 blocks away from the depot. But yes, he would ride his bike out to Spring Mill and sneak in without paying. We do know that. Anything else? Okay.